You're live.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم ألهمنا رشدنا وفقنا بما تحب وترضى لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين اللهم زدنا علما فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا الكتاب وعلمنا التأويل بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أما بعد السلام عليكم brothers and sisters. We are now continuing off of our Quranic Exegesis series, which is essentially Quranic Tafsir. We had begun with Surah Yunus last week, and we are continuing on to the second verse from there. We will jump right into the context of our verse. Here in Arabic, أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ أَنذِرِ النَّاسَ وبشر الذين آمنوا أن لهم قدم صدق عند ربهم قال الكافرون إن هذا لساحر مبين. The Quranic verse we plan on studying together by God's grace and mercy. So we start out with the interpretive words, looking to the meaning, and by the end of the lecture, God willing, we will put it together and observe what all meanings essentially entail. That is, the words placed together by their meaning. And as thus, we hope to complete the context of the verse altogether in the light that remembering the Quranic narrative when it comes to the Quran in Arabic is very much circular, like other languages, sister languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, etc. So as such, among other matters as well, there are linguistic tools, terms, phrases that are utilized in Arabic which require sentences to translate into English. And this is very much important for our observation. We begin with akana. This phrase here, translating as, is it so? With a question mark. Is it really? Being in a state of question. The interesting thing though, the question here is not a sincere question. It is actually a question, laful istinkar. It is a phrase that is utilized in order to show a level of unhappiness with the approach of a manner. And as such, with that in mind, when we say unhappiness, it also includes denunciation, a form of denunciation. So, أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا, the phrase here again utilized is to begin with, is it really so? With a denunciation. What is it that we are talking about? And that's the important part here. Remembering that linnas in our phrase, generally speaking, so we can begin and understand what is happening. The Prophet Muhammad is a human being, alayhi salatu salam, and he claims to, in Islamic perspective, of course we believe in such a thing, in Islamic theology, his position is that he is arguing for that which is good on behalf of the Almighty and as a human being to the human race. He is also arguing with regard to this matter about things that we as humans should try to stay away from. And this brings us to the discussion known as behavioralism and its connection to God consciousness within the human being. A few questions that arise. Are human beings better off without, in the perspective in Islamic theology, revelation, help, a guide for their interactions in life? Can we alone differentiate between what is right and wrong without a level of revelation? The Quranic narrative is that we have instincts that we can correlate to that help guide us. But those instincts can be forgotten and those instincts can be altered. And when we say instinct, we mean a natural disposition the Almighty had instilled in the human being. But long story short, the argument is in the end, there are things as human beings we can decipher as right and wrong, but those things can definitely be diluted. Our observation, thoughts, and conclusions can very much be diluted. So as such, You will find people in certain practices permitting the marriage between a brother and sister. Islamic theology, the books of Revelation, and scriptures will say this is not a good thing to do, as you can understand. Let us continue. Linnas. So the context is the Prophet Muhammad, and he's in the context of a era in which the Arabs in that area aren't as such educated in comparison to other civilizations. I am referring here to the context of Revelation. They have traces of the preaching of Abraham and Ismail, etc. But again, it has been altered and changed over time. Here, the phrase in the Quranic text is talking about a people who provided levels of excuses against the observation, position, and entity of the Prophet Muhammad and the context of Revelation. Let us continue now with that said. Akana linnas. Linnas. And nas in Arabic, as many of us know, would mean people, humankind. But in Arabic, you can also utilize phrases to mean particulars. So you can utilize, for example, the concept of if the majority of people in a room were male and there were a few females, you could say the men. Or you can say the opposite of that. If the majority with females and there were a few men, you can say the females or the sisters, for example. With regard to that similar observation, just for our personal thought, linnas is a general term, yurid bil khas, it means specific. So there were a group of people, akana linnas, there were a group of people, and this group of people, there is a rhetorical denunciation being described to them. Okay. And the interesting thing again about this particular phrase is that linnas here, it means that these people created these excuses in a way of gist, in a way of degradation, and in an attempt to falsify the position of the Prophet Muhammad. We yet are to fully build the connection of what is exactly being talked about, but hopefully we are alluding to the things that can connect it. Remember the verses from verse number 2 now. أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ عَجَبًا أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ أن أنذر الناس وبشر الذين آمنوا أن لهم قدم صدق عند ربهم قال الكافرون إن هذا لساحر مبين. So the phrase linnas is interesting, as I have said, because the Arabic tool here where it says linnas, and it did not say عند الناس. Linnas, it means that there is a negative connotation. That is linnas, it means that there are a group of people that had created excuses and just in a form of degradation or to attempt to falsify the position of the Prophet Muhammad in that civilization, in that period. Okay? And they are not sincerely asking questions for truth, but instead they are creating questions with a preemptive state to reject. So that's why that Arabic phrase linnas here is very much important. It did not say again inda nas. Inda nas, it could mean that there were sincere questions being asked. Okay, there were sincere ajab, there was a sincere astonishment to what are the things that are occurring. So in this context, again, linnas, it means there is a premeditated state that a person is asking to create ambiguity and not asking to learn with a sincere approach for, you would say, guidance in Islamic theology, in a scripture-based perspective. أَكَانَ لِلنَّاسِ أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا. أَنْ أَوْحَيْنَا. The phrase here that we have revealed, right? أَوْحَيْنَا means revelation, and it is in the plural form. And again, Old English is very similar with regard to that. We, meaning I. But the Almighty is ever great, so the phrase utilized as we is an indication of his greatness. It does not mean, as you can understand, multiple gods. And this is something you can see throughout the Quran. Okay. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. So there are verses in the Quran that says, we have not inspired and revealed uh, before you, Prophet Muhammad والسلام, except that we revealed to them that there is only one God, Ana, and I am this particular deity. So that Quranic text, for those of you that are still in a state of ambiguity to this approach of Old English, or as you can understand in our context, that majestic we that Arabic utilizes quite a bit, that Quranic phrase is very much clear. We have not sent before. We have not given revelation, except in the context of calling to that I am one and take God as an approach as monotheism. Ila, upon, okay, to the receiver, giving on to them. Rajul, Arabic phrase, a man, a human, a person, but not just any person, because rajul, though it can mean a male individual of a suitable age, it can also be utilized to indicate a mature male figure who is able, who is qualified, who is adequate. And in this context, as you can understand, is the Prophet Muhammad. So far in that, the denunciation, lafdul istinkar in this Quranic verse, so far we understand that one of the things, linnas, that a group of people created in a way of gist, in a way of an attempting to, you can say, discredit an individual, was the claim that revelation was given to rajul, to a man, to a human being. And this opens up a number of subjects. To a human being. Why not to an angel? Is one of the things that they said. The response to Quranic philosophy is that the Almighty places ambassadors that can relate to their type and kind in a way that is suitable and be a representative in the context of their living. Because the Almighty, as you know, is very uniquely infinite in Islamic theology, and that in His infinity, He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, cannot be seen with our own two physical eyes, and that God is not in a space. Space doesn't surround God. Do you see? Time doesn't affect God. The Almighty is the designer of time. He is the designer of space. So they created this group of people. They started to propose such things. And among other things, they said, this rajul, this man, is a man who, for example, is an illiterate man. And that's the interesting thing, because the Prophet, though he was illiterate, was able to produce such a thing that was extremely unique in the context of that culture and literature and perspective. Furthermore, in that illustration of this man, the things that they also stood to create in astonishment, ajab, they are in a state of astonishment, is that جعل لنا إلها واحدا إن هذا لشيء عجاب, that he had, instead of the polytheistic practice in that region, he is calling to a one deity form of being, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is, of course, laysa kamithlihi shay, is nothing like unto him. And that again was something that pulled them back. And this subject is very deep. You can go into it in a number of different descriptions and illustrations for us to understand. أكان للناس عجبا أن أوحينا إلى رجل منهم. Looks like the ajab here is missing. That's okay. And أوحينا إلى رجل منهم. So the context is that they were in a state of ajab. And ajab is like in a state of pulled back and strangeness. Okay, with awe and splendor and a sense of strangeness and awe and splendor. However, because it is linnas, ajaban linnas, akana linnasi ajaban and awhayna, it means that that ajab made them again preemptively and premeditated, questionable observations to create an element of rejection without question to understand. And this was the issue. And as such, again, akan, there's a lafless istinska, there's a denunciation in their state. أكان للناس عجبا أن أوحينا إلى رجل منهم, from among them. Okay, from among, that is from among the human being, from the state of this Arabian Peninsula, from the culture of these people, from an individual who, again, was in the sight of this state of Jahiliyyah, pre-ignorance, wasn't a very rich man in the sense of richness like the riches that were found among the richest. So they created, you see, رجل من قريتين عظيم لهم يقسمون رحمة ربك. There's a Quranic verse that some of the claims of people at the time of prophets and messengers were like, why wasn't the revelation given to this individual that has tremendous wealth and land and space? Because you see, there's a misunderstanding in this context. That misunderstanding is people, they assume righteousness and greatness with God is based upon the monetary income a person creates or has. Or it is based upon the monetary status a person holds in society in connection to position. Do you see? And that's a mistake human beings still make till this time. They look to a person, and that's a great person because of the monetary income they have. Or that's a great person because of some material form of accredited element. But there are things that are greater than these materialisms. That person can very much be great if they utilize that materialism for goodness. But the materialism itself doesn't make a person great. It is how a person acts with the materialism that they have. Okay, and with the purpose of, with an objective and principle given to him. So as such, so far, these people are in a state of awe and splendor in a questionable sense, that a person from among them who held a particular circumstance, was of a particular circumstance, receives a form of revelation, and that in the context of this revelation, he is ordered to do something, which is an andir in nas. Okay, an andir, that is to remind the people, to provide an alarm to the people that are doing wrong things. And that's the interesting thing. So, wa'dul banat is considered some of the major sins, as we know. The Prophet Muhammad, he said, Imam Bukhari and others, he said, the Prophet Muhammad said, the Prophet Muhammad forbade things. And among those things is wa'dul banat, to, as you can understand, to bury the female gender alive. Okay. But the interesting thing, he also talked about other things as well, like the care of the orphan, as you can understand. And he also changed certain practices that they did. He brought it into the context that relationships between husband and wife are essentially one of the most important things to fulfill your promises in and to be of great conduct, among other very deep elements. So what he started out with in the Quranic verse is that this man that you feel strangely about, that you feel you are pulled back and you are creating these arguments within your mind, and that this individual, what he is burdened with, he is carrying upon his shoulders, chosen by the Almighty, is to remind you of the wrong things you are doing as an alarm, that wrong things that you do of oppression or transgression in the long run will come back to haunt you, will come back to hurt you, but especially you will fall beneath the displeasure of the Almighty for the choices you make. And one day you will stand before him. This also includes the discussion of theology, the discussion of one God, etc., in the context that the person has the knowledge and it has reached him, and they have the intellect, and they have comprehended it, and they have the soul to receive it. At that point, there is a weight upon the person's shoulders when that soul recognizes that this is actually of truth. And that's the point. So in monotheism, it is very much based upon this observation. That is, the entity himself, the person, the moment they recognize that truth, among other things, is a tremendous step. They can either step forward or they can start to rationalize things that aren't necessarily just. And that's the issue. And why are they doing that? Is it to learn? That's a different subject. But out of, let's say, no way, why would an Arab man receive revelation? Why isn't he from this other culture, right? Why isn't he from that culture or that class? Why didn't he speak that language? You see, among other things. And this is an issue. Why wasn't he a very big, rich man? Why wasn't he a certain complexion of his skin? These are all issues, or tribe, or among other things as well. So this individual that they are in a state of awe and splendor over, and creating this discussion among themselves, is given the responsibility to remind the people of and alarm the people, warn the people that indeed there is a God who sees and hears, and he is seeing the actions you make, and that one day, sooner or later, there is an accountability. So that to warn, and here it says an-nas, it says again an-nas. So the Quranic verse, it says, if you look to it, akana lin-nas, it says already an-nas. It already said it once. Akana lin-nas ajaban an awhayna ila rajulin minhum an andir an-nasa. Again, number 2, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَنَّ لَهُمْ قَدَمَ صِدْقٍ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. So in that Quranic verse, an-nas is used 2 times. Once very much specific, but at the same time, it is used again. And an-nas, it means humanity, generally speaking. But it can also mean a specific people. It can mean an Arab, it can mean a non-Arab, it can be depending on the context and phrase of that conversation for which that is happening between them. But one might argue that there are 2 meanings in an-nas, and both are correct. Here, it is that to warn such people that are, you see, are trying to justify within their minds and create arguments against the Prophet Muhammad because of his class, because of maybe his skin color, but particularly then because of his status in the society or something of this nature. That is not a measuring stick for the greatness of a person. So you can say that there is a reward, a reminder and an alarm and a warning for you, especially people that are saying these things, but at the same time in general. So it starts out with warning, right, to remind the people that the actions that they are doing is of wrong. And then it says, in addition, his role is to do something else. And that thing, which is he's supposed to be doing as well, is provide glad tidings. So you can see it started out with the negative actions to clarify that these actions people are doing are wrong and the reasons why they are wrong. And then it begins to start talking about providing glad tidings for the good actions you do. So you can see there is definitely a denunciation for those original people. But we know that in the Quranic text that the phrases, though they might seem specific to people, it is a reflection upon people that are similar to that. Okay? So sometimes in a state where you, for example, are raising your children or your friends or something, and they're doing something wrong, the guidance is to teach them in a way that is better and demonstrate to them that it is better, in a way that is better, that the actions that you are doing is wrong. Now that that is understood, you can now explain to them, or once that is an indication or even a message sent, now you can explain to them al-bushra, the good things, okay, the glad tidings of things. This is wrong because such and such things are the effects and negativity, etc. But to stem out of it, this is the option you have, that you can, for example, create within yourself and produce within those that you love, and as such build off of it in goodness and receive that glad tidings. Okay, so there is the phrase bushra here, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. So the Prophet Muhammad, this individual, this man, carries the burden of warning people that this is, things are wrong, and that there is a meeting with God sooner or later, and that choices you make, there is accountability. At the same time, the opposite is also true, that though there's accountability in that sense, the good things, if you choose to do instead, will create an everlasting peace and existence. And when we say everlasting existence, we mean the name of yourself will continue, right? The name of yourself. And when we say the name of yourself, being a spiritual phrase, that you and the actions that you have done will remain with the Almighty. And that's why God says in the Quran, مَا عِنْدَكُمْ يَنْفَدُ وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. What you have of materialism, it swoons away. Sooner or later, it goes away. But what remains with the Almighty are the actions that you have chosen to do. And Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi, he has a statement, is an interesting fellow in the Spaniard Islamic region of that area. He talks about life's experiences, and he said, you look to life, and as you're looking to life, you work tremendously for, but anything and everything in life has a period where you separate from it. As such, if you understand that, if there's a moment of separation from everything in life sooner or later, that means that all happiness that you have through materialism will eventually lead to sadness or a level of sadness. This is what he argues. It is philosophical observation. And as such, he argues that if we know the materialism swoons away and everyone and everything that is connected to you in materialism in this world swoons away, then essentially the happiness that always remains are the things that you do of piety, the actions that you do of piety, because the physical element of it is finished, but the blessings and the account with the Almighty lives and exists. And the Almighty, as we know in Islamic theology, we argue he doesn't forget, of course. وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. The Quranic verse, your Lord is never a forgetfulness, doesn't forget. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not a trait of his, a name or attribute, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he argues that, hey, if that's the case, then realize that the good things that you do will continuously exist, though the material form of it you might separate sooner or later. So as such, that wise person will constantly only find full happiness when they connect themselves to everlasting being, who, the designer, etc., will continue to preserve the things you have done. And thus you see and will see and continuously see, God willing, the fragrances of it in your life and after you pass into the next life as well. So the Prophet Muhammad's role to give glad tidings to people of matters to rejoice over, to call people to that which is beneficial to them. Okay, he will denounce things that are either intrinsically evil, that is, that it is fully evil, or it has a greater evil to it. And he will call to good things that are either, essentially good, and its whole is good, or the majority or the larger portion of it is good. Okay, and that is usually what is found, as you can understand, in the context of you might say, the rulings in Islamic thought. So to give glad tidings, but especially to those that amanu, okay, those are the faithful individuals that sincerely, after understanding and comprehension, they believe in the role and context of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and that anna lahum, and belonging to them, a glad tidings of happiness, okay, a uniqueness. Qadama. Qadama is an interesting Arabic word because it also means the foot, okay, and it also can mean precedence or pre-eternity or foremost, and all of that is true. So why would the qadam be named? Why would the qadam, which means here qadama, it could mean pre-eternity, past time. It can also mean foremost, like this person is the foremost in doing this good thing, is it from the elite of doing these good things. It can mean precedence. But at the same time, that word is also used to talk about the foot. And that's the interesting thing, because the feet symbolically is analogical to the actions that you do. You walk towards something, it is indicated as such. So in linguistics, you'll find phrases that the foot is mentioned, but it's actually talking about the actions you choose to do. You can also find that, for example, in yad. Yad means hand, but it can also mean to give in charity. Okay, yadullah, pardon me, the Prophet, yad al-ulya khayrun min al-yad al-sufla, the upper hand is better than the lower hand. But here it really means the upper hand that is giving in charity. So it is an indication of the charity. Okay, so that phrase here is utilized. That is for the people that believe and they work these good things and they acknowledge these aspects. For them is precedence. Okay, for them with the Almighty's pre-eternity established of their success and His unique knowledge. For them is that they are of the people. Here, if we say that qadama sidq, it means that they have chosen to go and do good things. And if that's the case, then for them is a sidq. And here, a sidq, though it can mean honor, it can mean truthfulness, among other things. It means bounty with God, it means nearness, it means a blossoming goodness in their life, a happiness in their life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the Almighty, and Rabbihim subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now what has happened is that this is the role of the Prophet Muhammad. قال الكافرون إن هذا لساحر مبين. So the phrase al-kafirun was used. And al-kafirun here, it means that the Prophet Muhammad came with this role, and he had his argumentations and proofs and his positions. And after this, there were people that initially started out with certain ideas and premeditated observations, weren't sincere in it. And then when things became clarified, al-kafirun, they hold a position and they say. And al-kafirun are people that, after recognizing validity and truths of an argument or position or a thing, they choose to cover it up and turn away with a state of arrogance. This is often the meaning of kafar, for example. So this type of individuals of people here, more particularly among the people in Mecca, some people in Mecca, they recognize the truth, they recognize it, and they sought it, and they were able to comprehend, and they saw it, and it entered their heart. But still, even though this happened, they still held a position of some type of tribal affiliation or something that eluded them, or some materialism of some sort that pushed them away. Okay, that pushed them away. And it was based upon, if we say tribalism or some type of materialism, the arrogance that is behind it, and as such covering up what they see and know to be true. And the interesting thing is the phrase that is used, قال الكافرون إن هذا, proclaiming إن هذا, this Quranic revelation, and the Prophet Muhammad himself, the sahir. Okay, and sahir we know is to be a magician, like a magic trickster, and then magic in these things. So people can read this and, okay, what comes up? Inna hada la sahirun mubin, a very clear magician. Of either inna hada, the dhamir is the Quran, actual Quranic text, the revelation, the phrases that are used, and or they're talking about actually the Prophet Muhammad himself. Both are correct and both support one another. Okay, the pronominal here in the linguistic refers back to both. And the interesting thing is they use the phrase la sahir, that he's a magician. Now the question is, why is that so interesting? A few things come up. They utilize the term as a sahir, a magician, because they recognized and knew and saw the revelation and heard it and saw the Prophet Muhammad. But the only phrase they can bring up to their mind, because what he's doing is very much unique, and they themselves knew it was very much unique. They themselves knew that the revelation, when they heard it and read it, was very much unique and special, and it had a very unique special message to it. And that the Prophet Muhammad himself they knew he was not a person who cheated, and they used to say that, we used to not say you ever prove treacherous to your promises or anything like that beforehand, or you used to lie or anything like that. So their phrase, la sahirun mubin, is a double-edged sword. Number one is that they are acknowledging the fact that this is a very unique thing that they cannot manipulate. Right? They are in a state of splendor. So the rationalization would be that now this is magic. Okay, this is magic. So they can use it in the negative connotation. And what do we mean by negative connotation? They mean that it is very much unique and special in these type of things, and our justification is that you are able to do these things because there's magic involved. And for them, magic was very real, not like magic for these in that time period and era. For them, magic was really very real and had an effect on people. Islam came to clarify the stance of such things in a more deeper detail as well. the extreme formats of what magic is, Islam came to give a balance. At the same time, also in this phrase, as we have said, is the concept of magic itself. And it continues to exist till this time in various cultures around the world, even here in the States as well. And various perspectives about it, and how is it real? What does it mean to be real? Whatever. But the phrase itself, it means awe and splendor, that something very unique is happening. And we see that, well, this is magic, or you see it in people watch it in, the children watch it in Disney movies or these type of things. They recognize that is very much a very unique circumstance that's happening at hand. Okay. With that in mind, at the same time, the phrase also means that they acknowledge the fact that this uniqueness and phrase of the Quran and its voice and message is very much a splendor and awe, and it is very much unique, and it is outside of the normal state of what is constituted as human language. When we say human language, human fundamental Arabic poetry, for example, or literature, or something of that nature, similarly, of that which is normalized among their people. So with that in mind, we ran through an individual breakup of the phrases that are there, and now we look to the meaning. And again, it is important for us to know that when coming to the translation of the meaning, remember to translate the meaning, and don't assume you can translate literally. Let's look at the observation of the translation of the meaning here, a meaning of the translation of the Quranic phrase, of the Quranic verse in the chapter 10, verse number 2, bringing things together for our understanding. This revelation of truth and guidance is worth your pondering and grace. Yet some of you choose to fall in bewilderment on the observational pretense that due to it being spoken through the vessel of a human you know very well of character and heritage, an illiterate individual, and as such, it is very much unique. How was he able to produce it? The Prophet Muhammad, like you, a human, you fall into bewilderment as an unworthy excuse because he is human, a man of noble class, yet you look for acclaimed blemishes, such as he at one point losing his father as a young man. Prophet Muhammad, as you know, as a young man, his father passed away. So there was a sense of orphan in that culture, especially. The long story short, his mother eventually would also pass away earlier on. So he was raised by his grandfather for a period, as many of us know the narrative, and supported by a number of his uncles. Certainly, this is not an honorable excuse, as humans were also sent to those before, other prophets and messengers of God, similarly carrying a very much similar message as this man. This man is revealed a revelation of guidance, admonishment, ponder, hope, and is supported from the heavenly realm. He is administered in order to bear the role proclaiming to humankind, warning against evil choices in that they are marked, seen, witnessed, and eventually potentially recompensed. Take heed to this. In addition to his call, he is ordered to proclaim and hold the position teaching for those who do good in accordance to this faith, thus accepting it with open souls without compulsion or evil, of this message with knowledge and sincerity, for them are glad tidings, pre-written in the heavenly realm, with the world's caretaker, their Lord. They choose to do those good actions. God, in addition, this man will stand as a witness for you, the Prophet Muhammad, in truth, standing with and for you, and in negation, even though you have seen, heard, comprehended the message and the vessel, the Prophet Muhammad, a human, you chose to reject and arrogantly turn away from him, and the message due to the unrespected desire adjuring the position they both, the revelation, the man, are elements of trickery and magic, while you know otherwise, and out of unholy reason choose to fabricate. This meaning is an address of the meaning of the Quranic verse. right? ألف لام را تلك آيات الكتاب الحكيم أكان للناس عجبا أن أوحينا إلى رجل منهم okay أن أوحينا رجل منهم أنذر الناس وبشر الذين آمنوا أن لهم قدم صدق عند ربهم قال الكافرون إن هذا لساحر مبين وقراءة لسحر مبين. So this is the meaning, brothers and sisters. This is a meaning of the translation of the Quranic verse. We pray and hope that this has been beneficial to all of us. The Almighty, He knows best. God willing, we look forward to meeting with you next week. Subhanallah, bihamdihi, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Take care, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.